Okay, first news topic of the week. This is a show that is about the latest gaming and technology news. So it is with a certain level of hushed awe that I'm about to introduce a news topic that is essentially a PC port of a 14-year-old game.
Wow.
Red Dead Redemption is coming to PC. It's been announced. It has some modern features that we shall likely discuss. There are spec recommendations for it. And I guess we go to our PC expert. Alex, tell us what you think about this.
Well, it's been a long time coming. That is the obvious bit. My interest levels are pretty much zero as a result of that, though, unfortunately, because, like, come on. I know this is going to sell really well just because people buy Rockstar games on PC, but it has been so long, and I think a lot of people have played this game via other means, that this is more like one you just kind of buy for your back catalog, but the price doesn't actually allow you to do that, I would argue. It's kind of pretty expensive. So it's not like something you'd buy just kind of on a whim. It's actually a pretty heavy investment. But regardless of that, I do want to talk about the tech aspects of it. It does offer up modern scaling technology, I believe HDR, and toggles as well for the kind of draw distance and shadow quality, where those are aspects arguably of an older game that would have been dialed back, specifically, especially for those, Xbox 360 and PS3, that you should really be able to push up to almost have zero LODs in the game at this point. Like, honestly, the game was already kind of geometry starved looking, I would say, when it came out in comparison to some other games. But now you should be able to push out stuff like grass draw distance and, well, there isn't that much grass in the game, but stuff like bushes and cacti at a distance, which I would hope. I think that's interesting, but I did see a lot of people online kind of worrying about the specs, and I think it's really unwarranted. We can talk about that a bit, I guess. The specs for the game point out basically a modern, well, semi-modern Ryzen for the recommended, as well as something like an RTX 2070 and RX 5700, I believe. Maybe the XT, I can't recall. And the point of that is that those are GPUs that have similar GPU power to the current generation consoles of PS5 and Xbox Series X. Not the exact same, but within, a certain percentage threshold there.
Within acceptable parameters.
Yes, exactly. And at that point, they're just trying to say that this is what you can use to get that current generation experience that we see like on the PS5 after the game was updated there. And I feel like that's all rather reasonable. The GPUs and CPUs they have listed, though, for the minimum spec, I presume have a lot to do with what they had on hand, and as well as the fact that this game is DX12, which I think I'm not a huge fan of that, actually. This was originally a game written around the time Rockstar's releases on PC were either DX9, DX10, or 11, and you could choose in the menu. So it's not doing anything that actually requires the higher end APIs, but this is written to DX12 for whatever reason. And as a result, that is going to limit the baseline GPU you can use, as well as the version of Windows, which, obviously this game's only coming to Steam and stuff, so it's limited to things past Windows 8 at this point. But I don't think that's a great idea necessarily. Technically, I imagined an 8800 GT or even a 7800 GT could run this game at some reasonable level if it was DX9 or whatever. But that is the way modern game dev works, to kind of push things to a newer API. Hopefully, though, it means that they do the new API well, with all the explicit memory management that requires, and more control over GPU, as well as more control over PSO compilation. Let's hope the devs actually do it well, and we don't get like oh, by the way, this game runs at 6,000 FPS on PC, but it stutters. That'd be really embarrassing and an absolute waste of everyone's time. So yeah, I would say not worry about those recommended specs at all. It'll probably glide and fly at any frame rate you want. but just be a bit more cautious because this game is DX12.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just a couple of notes from me. I was just looking at the specs. I googled Red Dead Redemption PC specs, and I got this. I got this article from Rock Paper Shotgun, and the headline is this: "Shout out to Red Dead Redemption's PC requirements for allowing me to finally meet the recommended specs for something." And it's like, well, you'd expect that considering the game's 14 years old. But as you say, there is what you might call a certain degree of bloat in those specs, Alex.
Yes.
And it's interesting that the 960 and the R7 360 are kind of probably a on par or a touch more powerful than the PS4 and Xbox One.
Right.
So that is like a generation beyond. But I think you're quite right. It will run on anything that would likely support DX12. And it'd be interesting to see how low you can go.
It would be interesting.
Yeah, and I guess, they're just going back to really old parts here. I was quite amused also to see the minimum specification CPU-wise, FX 9590. That's like, peak bulldozer AMD.
It's awful, but why not? It ran on a cell, sure, it could run on that.
Yeah, that actually reminded me of a small anecdote I shall share, which is, you were talking about the scalability of vegetation. Back in the day, I did the face-off for Red Dead Redemption on PS3 and 360, and it was an outright 360 victory. And I actually got a stealth email from one of the developers afterwards, and he considered the face-off as kind of like, he literally described it as somebody marking his homework. And something that he also said in there was that the map, because we were talking a lot about the detail downgrades in PlayStation 3, and he was basically saying that when the map was designed, there was no actual plans for a PS3 port.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so this is just kind of like, it's quite interesting how secretive Rockstar is, and I think there's like probably a huge amount of anecdotes that we're probably never going to get any kind of visibility on there, but that one was quite interesting. DX12, I mean, I'm assuming that it is DX12 because there was some degree of a porting effort made for the current generation consoles, specifically PS5 and obviously the Switch. Who knows what's happening with Xbox at this point? But John, any thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, first, I'm a little bit disappointed with those requirements because I was hoping I could test this on the Fury X. Does the Fury X do DX12? I don't think it does.
It does do DX12.
Does it?
It doesn't have driver support anymore, however.
Yeah, the question is whether or not it'll even run is another question.
And I really wanted to see that. But at least we can assume that it would run beautifully on that shining Radeon 7 there in the background, in Rich's upper right corner there.
Well, maybe that exact one, but one of them. Is that the working one, Rich?
That's the one that doesn't work.
Oh, that's the one that doesn't work. So maybe not that exact one. So, okay, my real thought here, though, is that I think it's cool that this is happening simply because this essentially becomes like the definitive release. It's the version that will stand through time. It's the version that can scale up as far as you can push it to its limits, and it will just continue to be available, I assume, for years and years and years, and playable on PCs henceforth. So it's basically just like making it accessible in a way that is very forward-looking, which is a great thing, and I'm happy that they're doing it for that reason. And also, given how light it is, it'll be one of those games that I'd imagine you could push up to 8K very easily, get some very high resolution imagery going on. Which would, it should have excellent image quality as a result. And yeah, it's an older game. There's limitations. The Polygon Bear in the trailer, I especially love with all of his very sharp shoulders. It's not quite sharp knees, but it'll do.
It's up there.
It's up there. I will say though, I think the terrain stuff still looks good, but man, this era of character models with all their normal map glory, I think it looks pretty rotten in a lot of ways. And in some ways, right. I actually think character models from top tier like PS2 original Xbox era games can look more visually appealing
less uncanny
than these. Like, I think the push towards normal maps was important and a good thing, but during this era, there's just that ugly, blurry, low res normal map stuff on low polygon models. a lot of times it doesn't hold up well, and the characters just look really grimy, especially at high resolutions, because this is a game designed for 720p. Let's be honest. And sometimes assets don't scale well up to high resolutions. All the flaws become extremely evident, which is kind of the case here. But still, good game. I'm happy it's on PC, and I'm sure it will sell well because it's Rockstar, right?
Absolutely.
I also expect a good deal of modding to come about as a result of this game, which could, if there are things the developer is not maybe aware of or taking care of, that a lot of people in the community will try and fix them up or get them looking better in some aspect. So all those grimy textures you talked about, those really bad normal maps and materials, maybe there is something to be done there, John.
That's a good
I doubt
point.
The models, though.
That's a good point, though. You're right. The modding community may step up. And I also expect I think Double 11 has done some good work in the past, and I kind of expect this to be a pretty awesome PC version. At least that's my hope. So this should be something that the community will be very happy to get their hands on, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if the modding community steps up, but, bearing in mind Rockstar seems to have declared war on the modding community, they may well be stepping down as well.
We'll see.
I mean, I just want to say one last thing about the DX12 thing. It actually does sadden me a little bit because one thing I really love doing with older titles is actually running them on older. This is just an Alex nerd thing, but I do love running them on older hardware to see like what could have been and what was. And here, DX12 really just limits it to any future going PC. And as well as it being online only.
This isn't that interesting of a game in that sense, though, 'cause it's not doing anything special or cutting edge that couldn't.
Yeah, you're right, but
like that sort of testing gets interesting when you're like saying, "Oh, I want to run Doom 3 on a Voodoo card, or I want to run Crisis on like a GeForce 3 or something." When you're stepping back multiple generations before features existed and like shoehorning it in, that stuff is cool. But like, this is just like what it's gonna look like. It would work on those machines if not for the API.
I'm very curious to what instructions it requires on PC. Can you actually run it on something like what was it compiled to?
Thank God it has frame gen too.
Oh yeah, you definitely need that in this game. Actually, this could be arguably one of the games where frame gen might lower your frame rate, where because it has a base cost, it may be more expensive a base cost than just rendering the game. I'm very curious about a lot of this.
We'll find
Except
out,
maybe
man.
at 80K, we'll see.
Okay, right. So Red Dead Redemption's coming out October the 29th. We will be covering it. I think it would be crazy not to, bearing in mind we've been calling for this port for untold years.
Yeah.
And we'll have more on that then.